And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, I just want to talk to things and just kind of, mention some channel updates that are going to happen real soon. At the time of recording this video, hopefully, fingers crossed, we are less than 14 hours away from Nat Turner, the president and CEO of PSA, coming on the channel. Like I said, we're 14 hours away. Last time he was supposed to be scheduled on the channel, he had the cancel morning of. But as we stand right now, that interview is still going on. And I think that interviews could potentially be a great interview. I think there's just so many questions that a lot of people have for PSA. I've mentioned it in another video. I am very nervous about the time crunch and being able to get all my questions in because that interview could only go for 30 minutes, maybe an hour tops if I'm very, very lucky. But if you've watched this channel and you've seen some of the interviews I've done in my past, those interviews just go hours. So it's going to be tough to do that time crunch, but there's a way to, I wouldn't call it ability for conversations go viral, but there's abilities for conversation to really last for a long time. And what I kind of mean by that is maybe it doesn't go viral in the view sense, but it goes viral in the sense that maybe people will refer to this interview in the future. What I hope to gain from this interview is to be able to ask them the good questions where people in other lives or people in other videos say, well, when Nat Turner was on PK's channel, Nat Turner said this. And that's what I'm hoping to get out of this interview, to get some of those viral clips or viral moments. And anybody watching this video after the fact, this is probably the point where you turned off the video if you didn't know that live happened, and you're hopefully watching that right now. But let's hope that happens. And then another thing I want to talk about is, and one of the things I do, and I've been really trying my best to do this, is I'm really trying to listen to the feedback from a lot of my viewers. And one of the feedbacks I get from a lot of the viewers is a lot of people say, hey PK, sometimes you've been talking too much about the investing aspect of Pokemon or too much about the flipping aspect of Pokemon. And people ask me to make, a more uplifting type video, and I listen to people. And so on yesterday's video, if you guys haven't had a chance to watch it, or was it yesterday's video or the day before? I think it was yesterday. I took 31 different Poketubers, and then I said, if that Poketuber was a superhero, which superhero would they be? And I really enjoyed making that video. So if you guys haven't had a chance to watch that video, I recommend you going back and watching that video too. And there's the very obvious people, okay, if Pat Flynn was a superhero, who would he be? If Pokerev was a superhero, who would he be? If Rattle Pokemon was a superhero, who would he be? I think those are some of the little bit more obvious ones, but then there's some of the more obscure ones too. If Joe Echo Base Collectibles was a superhero or Coulson was a superhero, and then I think it's fun. I think a lot of people watch that video and they're kind of able to, in a way, hopefully play along. So after you, it's pretty obvious, immediately at the beginning of that video, you could understand the tone of it and the point of it. So by the end, hopefully you're able to play along. And I had a lot of fun making it. And I have plans to do videos like that in the future. Editing videos is way tougher than just pressing the go live button and talking to a camera. The easiest part of that video was just the actual recording aspect, because then I was just able to record myself the same way I would do on a live, just talking to the camera, one long video, and then I cut it up that way. There was only one part in that entire video I messed up talking, and that was just talking about Jake from Pokenomics. If Jake was a superhero character, who would he be? I stuttered a little bit during that one little part, but the rest was easy. That was the easy part, is just recording myself talk. When it comes down to the actual editing, yeah, it could take a couple hours. So yeah, everybody that did watch that video, I think they were pretty receptive to it. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I recommend you going and watching it. And if you have any recommendations, there's a couple people if Rattle was a superhero, who would he be? I think those are the more obvious ones, but there was a little more niche ones, and I gave you my thought process. And another thing I really strive to do in that video, which is something I'm telling you guys, I'm really working and trying my best to grow as a content creator, grow with the type of content I'm making, is I talked about 31 different Poketubers, and my goal is to keep that video under 20 minutes long, and I was able to. It was just shy of 19 minutes. So even at 31, that's less than 30 seconds about per person, or a little over, I should say that, a little over 30 seconds per person, plus with the intro and the outro. It was tough, but I like to challenge myself. I think it's good. I don't want to ever become stagnant in the type of content I make or what I bring to the community. I want to constantly I constantly want to grow. The same way I want to grow on this channel, it's the same way I just always am trying to grow as a person. And I do listen to all the criticisms. And, you know, one of the things that like a lot of criticisms I get is, there a lot of people talk about like the egos in Pokemon. And listen, I have to like tackle criticism head on. Like, I definitely feel I have an ego, and there's a lot of people in the Pokemon content creating space has an ego. And I feel like the word ego in its own, like, that word almost sounds like a negative thing. Like, oh, that person has a big ego, where therefore it's a negative thing. Where ego, the same way as everything in life, the answer kind of falls somewhere in between, right? Like, there's positives and negatives to having a big ego or a little ego. Like, having a big ego, usually that person is confident, they're willing to do like high risk tasks. And then the negative is somebody who has a very small ego probably has very low self-worth. And so there's always like that fine line, and that's something I'm always constantly trying to craft for myself, is like trying to, and again, it's a tough definition to even describe ego, but like, there's pros and cons of egos. Like, one of the pros for an like big ego is, depending on the job, like, there's a lot of jobs out there that when you write on your resume, you work well in, fast paced, high pressure type jobs. Those are not the jobs for everybody. You don't want somebody to go into a high intensity, fast paced type job who has like very low ego or very low self-worth or very low self-confidence, because self-worth and self-confidence, that goes into your ego. So if you have somebody with those poor ego qualities of that low self-worth, you don't want to put them in a high pressure, fast paced job, because they're not going to be able to flourish in a type of job like that. But people with like lower egos are able to flourish in other type of positions. And one of the dangers about having like a bigger ego is you are definitely more afraid of failure. And I definitely fall within that class. I definitely think I am, like, my ego does take control sometimes when it comes to that, being worried about failure. But and then also with having a big ego, sometimes you could potentially put yourself in positions that maybe you're underqualified for because of that high self-confidence, and then that could potentially be the dangers of stuff like this. So these are things I'm constantly keeping in mind in the back of my head. One of the things a lot of people always want me to talk about is like Japanese product, Japanese releases, Japanese Pokemon just in general. And while I do feel I have a decent understanding of Japanese, it's not in my comfort zone. That's why I don't talk about it that much, because I always know, like, I don't ever want to put myself in a position where I might be potentially overconfident in my abilities. In fact, where my abilities are lacking. And like Japanese product, Japanese Pokemon releases, that is where I feel my experience is lacking. That's why I'm constantly trying to like pull back from that. So it's a constant balance, and I think everybody needs to just be aware of where you are. But it's the same thing with like when you have like a very low ego, a lot of times people are not willing to take a big risk. And by not taking a big risk, that is not always a negative thing. Sometimes that can be a positive thing. People who are, with larger egos, people are usually pretty risk averse, meaning they're willing to like take that gamble. And it's just like investing in the stock market or your 401k at work. Like, you have your high risk, your medium risk, low risk investments. Those high risk investments, those are the people that are more risk averse. They're just willing to go in and they don't care. And a lot of the times is because they have time on their side, but not all the time. And those high risk investments, those can be the ones that fluctuate the most. Where those low risk people, they don't have that huge fluctuation. And again, a lot of that has to do with age, but it also has to do with just like, how your self-confidence and stuff like this. But these are all things I have to be very mindful of, and things that I have to constantly like I'm always battling this, always trying to get better because, the way I take on life or the way I take on this channel in general is every day you should be striving to get better. You should never be striving to get worse. And the only way I feel you can ever get better is you constantly have to be looking at your pros and your cons and, just making yourself a better overall person at the end of the day. And in the Pokemon hobby, I think there's just so many opportunities to make yourself better. And the best way to become better in this hobby is to identify where your faults are in this hobby. There's a lot of people out there I talk to, and they have like so much enthusiasm, and their thought process is like very thought out, but yet the execution, they're doing a lot of things. It's very easy sometimes to like quickly identify things people are doing wrong in this hobby. You know, a lot of things we talk about on this channel is we talk about like investing and stuff. And some of the like things that I quickly am able to identify that things people are doing wrong, other channels talk about them, like people who are buying Pokemon for a flipping and they don't have reseller license. So they're paying a ton of taxes on both ends. They're paying taxes to buy that product, and then when they go to sell that product, they pay taxes again. Where at least if you have that reseller's license, you can cut out taxes right at the beginning. Like I see a lot of people make this, mistake, and you can be on the very small end of that, or you can be on the very large end of it. And you don't want to be on the very large end of somebody who's into Pokemon strictly for the flipping and you don't have like a reseller's license, because yeah, when you're only talking about, oh, I only flip $1,000 worth of product a year, it's like, yeah, it's probably not worth it. But people are like, in the future, I hope to grow my business into hundreds of thousands of dollars and flipping a ton of product and doing all this stuff. And then it's like, whoa, there could potentially be a ton of taxes at that point if you're paying taxes to buy that and then you're paying taxes again to sell it. And, or it's just like people who underutilize grading, or somebody who is potentially grading with the wrong card company, or there's like just so many nuances in this hobby that I think people have the ability to easily just become much better doing certain aspects. And I'm always amazed at how many people are super, super successful with like moving inventory. But when you really start to go into them and start to ask them about like, okay, what are you moving? And then you start to hear about their entire collection. Some of the people I've talked to recently, like a large position of what they're hoping to sell or they're hoping to flip into this hobby, because a lot of people I talk to, their goal in flipping into this hobby is to grow their overall collection or just become much larger in this hobby. But when I really start to like hound them about, oh, okay, like what's your inventory look like? They have so much old inventory because they only get comfortable selling a certain aspect, whether they get comfortable selling raw cards or they only get comfortable selling graded cards, and maybe they have a ton of sealed product that they're just not comfortable selling. And these are all like the same issues that I've ran into in the past. Like, and then I say, well, why do you have all the sealed product and why are you not selling all this stuff? And then a lot of the times their answer is, well, I'm just worried about returns. Worried about people saying that this stuff is resealed, returning this product. There's all those like little things. And a lot of times people don't even realize that that might be one of their faults that they have. And it's important. Like you always should have like a good perspective of yourself in this hobby. And just realize where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, and just constantly get better. And that's what I have to do, especially when people say, oh, like sometimes people's egos could get in the way. And I don't know. I work at a job in my real life where you gotta have like the ability to enter like high risk, stressful situations. My job, when I talk to my friends who, again, now this is pulling a little bit out of Pokemon, but when I talk about my actual job that I work on at 9 to 5, when my actual friends that know what I do, they can't believe that I do the job I do, because it's very like stressful job from the minute I get to work to the minute I get home. It's just go, go, go. You're constantly talking to different clients. You're constantly like supervising a bunch of different people. I'm constantly like managing other subcontractors. I'm definitely doing a lot of things on the day to day. And my day from the second I go to work to the second I leave is just nonstop like stress. But for me, that's a type of environment that I like to work in. I like to be constantly busy. I like to be like mentally stimulated throughout the day and constantly be challenged at my job. There's other people out there who the thought of a job like that where you're going to be more or less stressed out all day is not a job people want to go to. But it's just the type of job I like to work because that's like my personal mentality, like that's my personal work ethic is I need that type of stuff. I cannot be stagnant. If I'm stagnant on a day to day, like when I on the very very off chance that I have a slow day, which those days are few and far between, but when I do have those days, like I'm not mentally stimulated. I don't feel very fulfilled in my day to day. And that's one of the things I like to do is my brain's going 24/7. And when I leave work and it's, family time, and then at nighttime when it becomes Pokemon time, I'm constantly just like trying to keep the wheels spinning. And, right before when I go to bed at night, I have to lay in bed and just decompress for like 15 to 20 minutes sometimes before I even fall asleep because I'm just always something's always going on. I'm always thinking about something. I always try to like prepare for the future, always trying to be like 3 or 4 steps ahead. And my brain is just constantly going. And I think it's important to do that. It's in a way like, I wouldn't call it mental gymnastics, but it's just about keeping your brain, strong, like keeping your mind strong, constantly challenging yourself. And I feel a lot of people like, you can get very used to maybe call it that more sedimentary lifestyle where your brain is constantly like always maybe not in the off position, but it's always in the sleep mode. You're always just very relaxed. I just can't do that. I want to maybe when I get older like be able to relax my brain a little bit, but right now like that's a muscle that I constantly want to work, and that's my brain. So I'm constantly like, and one of the things I love to do is I'm constantly trying to read up, whether that's, like different reports, like new scientific articles for work, keeping up with like latest technologies, stuff like this. This is stuff that I do all day long when I'm at work. I'm constantly trying to like figure out like what's the future? What's the latest innovation? Where's the technology going? Where's the science going for all the stuff that I do on my normal? But then when I get home, it's the same way. When I think about Pokemon, when I'm done shipping out my eBay orders, when I'm done packaging stuff, when I'm done listing new items, I'm constantly still trying to research stuff. And researching now, today, I have found has become very different than maybe research in the past. Research today is even just running through different Discord groups, like seeing what is today's conversation, what were today's leaks, what are the whispers from, distribution, what are reprint schedules potentially looking like? And you can do all that stuff relatively quickly. And then I like to go on eBay still and just, look at market trends, look at my normal, search terms and just see if those cards come up. I like to look at eBay items ending soonest, eBay items recently sold, sort those by highest price first, do all this stuff. Because I'm constantly like trying to just keep my brain going, keep trying to like stay ahead of that curve, stay ahead of like I don't really know how to put it, but these are things I like to do though. And yeah, but it goes back to like understanding your faults too. And you understand your faults if you have like a big ego, which I'm not going to sit here and say I don't. Like I'm very very well aware of like my strengths and my weaknesses. But again, it's like if you have a big ego, you will be willing to put yourself in situations that you are just not competent to be in. And so I'm just always doing whatever I can to not put myself in those situations, to be very aware of my strengths and my weaknesses. And I mean, we do find ourselves doing that a lot in this hobby though. Taking on that next big chance, that next big, I call it what's the next play in Pokemon. We're always like trying to do that. And you know, it's good to pull yourself back sometimes and and if you do decide to like take that leap, understand what you're doing. And don't just be like, oh, I'm just going to do it because. I hear a lot of people just say the word because too much. Personally, I hate the word because. Why did you do it? Because. Because why? And then if there's never an answer after the why, you, your answer can't always be, I just did it because. Because is not an answer. Because it wasn't an answer yesterday, it's not an answer today, and it won't be an answer a week from now or a year from now or forever. You can never just say because. You don't just do stuff because. Everything you do always has to have a reason why you do it. And if you're just doing it because somebody told you to do it, or you saw somebody do it, or you heard this guy was doing it, like, don't do that. Because probably the person you heard doing it, or the person who had like a different thought process behind it, maybe it was a more thought out, or maybe it was like a high risk thing and they worked out like the strengths and the weaknesses of a certain play they do. Like, don't just do anything because. Do all your research, make smart, well-informed decisions in this hobby, the same way as you should always be making smart, well-deformed decisions in your life in general. Always do that. So, yeah. Let's see. But yeah, I listen to everybody. I'm constantly trying to become better. And like I said, that superhero video was a video that was different. I took it everybody's advice. I said, PK, don't talk about the money, don't talk about the flip, and don't talk about the invest, and do something different. And I did that. So if you guys haven't had a chance to watch it, it's the first link in the description below. Check that out. But if you're watching this tomorrow at some point, hopefully, fingers crossed, that Nat Turner video does happen. And I'm excited to sit down and talk to Nat Turner. I'm always super impressed by certain people, just not just in this hobby, but life in general. And Nat Turner is one of those very, very impressive people. To see what he's doing at the young age he's doing it, to see, I mean, what PSA is doing right now, what WADA Games is doing right now, what just Collector's Universe is doing right now, or Golden Auctions and all this stuff. It's pretty impressive. And I can't wait to pick his brain, and I can't wait to pick his brain from the more Pokemon side of it. Because while Nat Turner has been on other interviews in the past, he's never been on a strictly Pokemon like focused channel. So what does that mean that he's willing to come on a Pokemon focused channel is I think PSA is starting to really, truly, truly, more than any other time in the history of PSA as a company, is they're truly starting to recognize the value and the importance that TCG is bringing to them. And obviously when you talk TCG, the number one TCG is Pokemon. And the fact that PSA is starting to become so aware of Pokemon and giving Pokemon, in a way, the respect it's always deserved. Because I feel like PSA, I mean, it's in the name, right? Professional Sports Authenticator. It's in the name. Now, sports. Pokemon always kind of felt like that shunned. Maybe call it like that redheaded stepchild of PSA. But I don't feel like it's like that anymore. I think people are really starting to realize what Pokemon has going for it, because all the positives Pokemon has going for it opposed to a lot of the negatives that sports has going for it. Like for some of the older sets, like when you go back and you look at like 1952 tops or 1909 T206s, stuff like this. One of the beautiful things about those really old baseball sets is you have a lot of people out there that are set collectors, people that want to have one of every single card in a graded slab. For a lot of this modern sports cards, like that is just the most ridiculous thought to ever have, because there are just so many modern sports cards that people just don't care about. And really, when it goes to sports, people truly only care about the biggest, heaviest hitters in a set. And you can have a lot of rookies who just never even play, people who more or less just sit on the bench for their entire season, where Pokemon, it's a little different. Pokemon is definitely a more set collector type mentality. And for a lot of these Pokemon too, like, it's just different than sports. So I think Pokemon in the long run, when you start to look at sets opposed to just cards, for baseball and sports, it is cards. That's what you look at. You don't look at sets, you look at cards. But in Pokemon, it's so much different. You look at sets the same way as people look at 1952 tops. So when you only look at sets, like, these sets are going to have that longevity that this old baseball stuff has. And I think that's like one of the strongest things Pokemon has going for it. And if you are a grading card company and you are looking at like for the future of grading in the future, and when you start to look at set grading and stuff like this, it's super enticing. right now for set grading in Pokemon, it's few and far between. Like a lot of your WotC, sets, you can make the argument that you want one of every card graded, especially for base set. You look at first edition, good luck finding any first edition common or uncommon in a PSA 10 sub $80. You're going to be really hard pressed to find that because that exists. That entire set collecting for graded. And then Skyridge, the same way. There's definitely a collector base out there that wants the entire set graded. I am personally one of those people. And then, yeah, are there people right now that are looking for an entire evolving Sky set graded, every single common, uncommon, non-holo, rare? No, not yet. But in the future, I definitely think that could be a possibility. But then even for evolving skies, and the same thing with Pokemon, there is a market for every single card graded. Now, this is where you're going to start to really get super down the rabbit hole, and you're really going to start to get into the weeds when you start to look at grading commons and uncommons from some sets. Like, I'll give you an example. Like a Heart Gold Soul Silver Ghastly. Like, the buyer pool for this card might not be super, super, super deep, right? And that's probably true, but there are some Ghastly fans out there that would want this card in a PSA 10. And now, this is a PSA 10 contender. It came out of a theme deck. That's why it's been penny sleeved. I think I could grade this in the future. And if it hits a 10, I think there's a buyer pool. Now, that buyer pool will shrink real quick. Like, anytime you get in Heart Gold Soul Silver era when it comes to commons, but this is the thing. That buyer pool for a card like that is going to be extremely, extremely minuscule. But the amount of competition as well is going to be extremely, extremely minuscule. Like a card like that might only have a total population of 10 graded in 10. Now, what is the possibility if every single person that owned that card graded that? Populations could absolutely explode. But that's not what we're really talking about. Like, the amount of people this is where you, like I said, you really get deep into the weeds for stuff like this when you start to talking about like some more super, super niche plays, but there's a lot of cards out there that are just like that. But like that's like one of the beautiful things Pokemon has going for it, is for just cards like that. There are Cubones and there are Marowak fans out there that are willing to just pick up one of these cards in a 10 because that's their favorite Pokemon. When you get a super obscure baseball player from the 1980s that nobody has ever heard of, and it's the definition of just the most truest type of junk wax card that possibly exists, like, there will probably never be a buyer of a card like that. So that's one of the beautiful things Pokemon has going for it. And if you are PSA, like, one of the things that PSA has definitely done to accommodate for those type of collectors is that set registry. There's a reason why people really love the set registry, is because they're able to do that completion type goal. And I think we've talked about this before. While Pokemon might have this sometimes illusion of established hobby, Pokemon is still very, very much in its infancy for a lot of things. But just because it's in its infancy, it's still growing. And maybe it's not infancy anymore. Maybe it's more those teenage years, that teenage angst type years. But Pokemon's growing. And the reason why it's growing, and it's things I've mentioned on videos in the past, is because the people in this hobby right now, they're re-entering hobby. Like, you have your original 99 generation. They didn't lose the love of Pokemon. They just grew out of it. They got too old for it. They went to middle school. They went to high school. They started picking up chicks, probably feeling at it, But when you get older, things change. Your life situation's different. Like, Pokemon no longer becomes this thing that you need to kind of, in a way, be a closet collector or be embarrassed that you like Pokemon when you get older. As you get older, you become more and more willing to do things like this. Put your face on a video on a YouTube channel and talk about Pokemon for hours upon hours a week, and it becomes more socially accepted, where maybe when you're a junior in high school, senior in high school, maybe people won't be as socially accepting that you're huge into Pokemon. So like, things just change. But because it's changing like that, and this hobby is becoming like an actual more well-defined hobby, and it's getting out of those infancy years, and it's tough. Like, there are definitely parts of this hobby that are extremely established. When you look at some of the higher end trophy type market of this hobby, or the higher end, I mentioned earlier, like first edition base, those are definitely the more established areas of the hobby. But even those areas are still relatively young. This hobby as a whole is relatively young. If you were to combine all the collectors watching this video real time, or all the collectors watching this video after the fact, and you just had everybody in a room and you told everybody, you said, okay, everyone raise your hand if you've been around this hobby for one day, and everybody's hands would go up. And then you would say, okay, 1 year, and then a couple hands would go down, and then you said 3 years, and then a few more hands would go down, and then you would say 5 years, and then a lot of people's hands would go down. Then you go 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, all the way till you get to like 10, 11, 12 years, until eventually everybody standing in that room, their hands down, because they haven't been back into the hobby for greater than 10, 11, 12 years. Until eventually, like, maybe you have just, say this video gets 1,000 views. Out of those 1,000 people in that room, and 1,000 people started with their hands up, when you start to get to 13, 14, who's been back in this hobby for 13, 14 years, you might only have like 4 or 5 people out of that original 1,000 people who still have their hands up. And when you think, well, how long is 10, 12, 14 years in this hobby? That is nothing. That is nothing. That is why we are definitely moving into a well-established hobby, because this is the same argument I have is right now, if you had everybody in their room and you said, how many people have been in this hobby for 10, 12 years? It's only a few people with their hands up. But now, everybody who's currently in the hobby today, at the time of recording this video, now if I think we did that same exact scenario, but 10 years in the future from today, the outcomes of that is drastically different. When you have that same 1,000 people and you're in the auditorium and everybody has their hand up, and you say, who's been around for a year? There's way more hands stay up. 5 years, way more hands stay up. 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. All the way to people that are currently in the video today, or watching this video today, are still around in 10 years. Instead of only having 4 or 5 people with their hands up, I bet you out of those 1,000 people, there's 100, 200. That's how absolutely bullish I am on this hobby, that you can go from today asking that question and having 4 or 5 people's hands up to doing that same question 10 years from now, and you have 100 to 200 hands up. When we get to that point, this hobby is going to be in such a good place. Like, anybody I'm just telling you, you can be bullish, you can be bearish on a lot of things, but don't ever sleep on this hobby. Don't ever be bearish on the future of Pokemon, or at least the future of these people. Like, the people I am most bullish on, it's not the cards, it's not the sets, it's nothing like that. The thing I am most bullish about is this hobby in 10 years from now, the people that are in it. And I've already seen it. Like, I talk to a lot of people, and maybe for a while, a lot of people would feel like, maybe in a way, a little embarrassed that they re-entered in 2020, because it felt like everybody re-entered in 2020. Nobody, I promise, if you're out there watching this and you re-entered in 2020 or 2021, do not feel embarrassed like you have not been around in this hobby for a long time. Do not, and I cannot mean this anymore. Do not feel embarrassed that you've only been around since 2020, 2021. The people that have been around for the last 3 years, the amount of information those people know is absolutely insane. Like, I've talked to some people that just got back in 2021, and the amount of information they've absorbed in the shortest amount of time makes my head spin. I can't even imagine how they're able to absorb the amount of information they had absorbed in such a short amount of time. Now, 3 years doesn't seem like a long time, but in the history of this hobby, it is. It's the same way as if you were in 2015 and somebody told you they got back into the hobby in 2012, you would have been like, oh, okay, you've been around for a while. Or the same way then you talk to somebody in 2018 and they said they got back in 2015, that's been a while. Or somebody who is in 2021, got back in 2018, like, it just changes. And the amount of information that people are absorbing right now, and the amount of things people know in this hobby, it's like a compounding effect. When I first got back into this hobby, and I've said this on other videos, I was not doing the deep dive rabbit hole type things that a lot of other people were doing. I talk about re-entering this hobby, buying up like unlimited base set Raichus. Like that was my introduction back to this hobby. Spending crazy amounts of money on eBay for unlimited Raichus. Some of the people I talk to now, and I say, oh, you just got back into the hobby? Like, what are the purchases you're doing? And they're like, I bought a booster box of every single modern set. I got my collection of ETBs. I've gone back. I've started to, like, research Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Diamond and Pearl, and Black and White. I also went back and I'm dabbling a little bit in the WotC stuff, but I'm super engaged in modern stuff. I really love Sword and Shield. I'm starting to speculate on Scarlet and Violet because I really like Scarlet and Violet. I got in the hobby only a couple years ago, but I speculated on Sun and Moon Alt Art Trainer cards, and then I'm also dabbling on some of these Full Art XY cards because I think maybe people are sleeping on XY cards. And I sit there and I'm just like, when did you get back? And they're like, 2021. And I'm just like, 2 years into this hobby, like, I was buying light play binder collections and learning about cards that way. Like, I remember picking up some cards and getting 2 years into the hobby when I got back in, I was still picking up binder collections of cards that had cards from, like, Neo Genesis or, like, and I was looking at some of these Neo Genesis cards and going, I've never seen this card before. What set is that? And that was 2 years into the hobby for me. And the scenario I just played out is the new scenario people are handing me today. It is so, so drastically different. But now, we're 3 years out of that pandemic craziness where everybody joined. We're only 3 years into that. Where we can be 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. I'm the most bullish on the future of the hobby and the people in this hobby. Like, I think there will come a time in this hobby where, like, people will have almost all information available to them, or all information that exists in this hobby will be out there in some form, some way, somehow. And yeah, there will definitely be people out there who are doing the legwork to start to still uncover that stuff. But we're just so, so new. It's such a new emerging hobby. It's crazy. But, like, that's why I'm bullish on this hobby. But I think, like, PSA, they also understand this. They see the growth this hobby's doing, where maybe, like, sports is starting to become a little stagnant. Like, sports, too. Sports is still very strong. You don't believe sports is strong when the Nationals are, like, this Nationals are coming up pretty soon in Chicago. Wait till you see how large the Nationals is compared to any Collecticon or Card Party or anything that we have in Pokemon. That National is huge. But sports is starting to, like, lose traction here and there, where Pokemon is not really losing that traction right now. It's constantly growing time and time and time. And there will come a time in PSA's near future that I do believe that eventually Pokemon will outsurpass sports. Now, Pokemon as a whole already surpasses individual sports, whether that's baseball, basketball, football, soccer, F1 racing, whatever people are grading with PSA. Like, individually, those sports, Pokemon's larger. But sports as a whole, Pokemon is still lacking. But it's not lacking by much, All sports grading for, like, June was 500,000. TCGs were 400,000. We're not far away. There will come a day in the near future that I do believe Pokemon is PSA's number one go-to graded card. And right now, as we stand, like, this hobby is so massive that people are able to, like, eat up the supply of cards, because you got to keep in mind 400,000 graded slabs hit in the market every month for the next 5, 10, 15 years. That's a lot of plastic hit in the market, and there will still need to be, like, a buyer pool for that. But right now, we're still seeing it. Graded cards still very strong. We've started to see upticks of a lot of cards in graded plastic. A lot of cards people were saying, things like people use the words slept on, a lot of, like, XY full arts, Sun and Moon alternative art card, or, like, team up cards. A lot of these cards are ticking up when in theory they should be ticking down with the more plastic that hits the market, but that's not really what we're seeing. So that is a strong indicator for Pokemon. And even some of these vintage cards too. You look at some of the most recent sales, before the pandemic, and and the reason I'm mentioning this card because this is a card I'm constantly watching. Before the pandemic, when I had Cool Trainer Ryan on for the very first time that I ever had him on this channel for an interview, Cool Trainer Ryan says he remembers in 2018 the first time a PSA 10 Crystal Charizard Holo sold for $5,000, and that was the first time ever that card sold for $5,000, and that was a huge deal. Like for that card to hit 5,000 was a big deal. Now, those sales for that card are between $10,000 and $15,000. So, I mean, everybody says, well, the vintage market's crashing. It's like, well, I wish it was crashing a little more because that Crystal Charizard, that's a hole in my collection that I couldn't believe it sold for 5,000. Now, then I couldn't believe it sold for 10,000. Now I can't believe it's selling for 15,000. It's like, why isn't that card pulling back more? Like let's have some of these cards pull back more. Let me get my buying opportunities again. But some of these cards may never get a chance. And the last time Dan Catch More Collectibles and Jake from Pokenomics, I talked during that live to Jake that I wanted to buy his Crystal Charizard, but I just couldn't get myself to spending that much money. And I might have to now settle for a 9, which that price of a 9, which is floating between like $3,000 and $5,000 right now, to get the 9. I'm going to have to pay similar to PSA 10 prices just 6 years ago. It's like, where's this vintage crash everybody's asking for? But then there's obviously like the outliers, the ones that do go down, supply and demand. I think where you're really going to see a lot of prices get hit the hardest are all these mid-grades, your 7s, your 8s. For a lot of this stuff, those 9s are staying okay, but 10s are strong. A lot of the stuff's going to be stagnant in the future. We could have this conversation all day, every day. Jade, yeah, so Jade or Rab, I'm just real quick looking at the bottom of the chat. He says, is there even a slept-on error now? Yeah, there are still slept-on errors now. I think Heart Gold Soul Silver is still a slept-on error. The fact that Legend cards can still sell for so cheap, pretty amazing to me. Some of these Prime cards can still sell for so cheap, amazes me. Diamond and Pearl, some of these level X cards, still amazes me at how, low some of these prices can be. Diamond and Pearl promos that came in those plastic clamshells that were absolutely dented up and dinged up, and what some of these high grades sell for, like, those still surprise me. You think about how hard some of those, think about modern promos for English today and how mass produced they are, and then you go back to some of these older, like, clamshell promos from Diamond and Pearl that were just pinched in with like that plastic might as well doubled as vice grips on some of these cards, and the indents you could like literally rub your finger through the indent in it. There's some of those cards that are just like, oh, well, maybe this stuff is selling for cheap, but the problem is are people going to want to go back? Are these truly slept on errors or are they not? And it's super subjective. There's a lot of like one-off promotional type cards, Shellos from Collecticon 2008. I think that card came from Diamond and Pearl Secret Wonders. It's a Shellos card in it though. It's got the Collecticon stamp in it. You can only get it if you went to Collecticon, Comic-Con. It has a Comic-Con. I got Collecticon on the brain. Not Collecticon, Comic-Con stamp on it. That was a Shellos card. You had to go there in person in 2008. So that's Diamond and Pearl, Secret Wonders. I think is it Secret Wonders? It's Secret Wonders. You had to be there in person. You got a promo card. That card's $40. It's like graded. $40 graded that card is. And it's like, well, you can't really go back and reproduce some of these cards because, one, you don't have a time machine, and number two, you had to go to that event in person. Or it's the same way with some of these Japanese, like, even some of the more mass-produced, like, Japanese Pokemon Center promos, too. It's too much sometimes. All right, let's see. We're going to scroll up to the top of the chat. The chat's going crazy tonight. Okay, I don't know how I got 122 people tuned in for this. You guys are the real ones, man. Appreciate you guys. If you're just tuning in now, listen. The reason why I made this video is tomorrow, hopefully, we're right around, let's see, 13, 14 hours away from Nat Turner coming on. Hopefully that doesn't get canceled. I'll know morning of. So last time he was on, I posted like the the preview the day before, and because it got canceled, I had to end up like deleting that preview and stuff. So I don't want to do that again. But once I get the okay from his secretary that he's going to be on, or I should say administrative assistant, once his administrative assistant gives me the green light, I'm going to schedule that live. And if you guys are able to tune in real time, listen. I know 2 o'clock on a random Tuesday is a tough time for a lot of people. If you can't tune in real time, don't sweat it. Just sit back, relax, enjoy it after the fact. Listen to the live. Hopefully it's going to be a good one. But we got number one mod in the game. Number one mod in the game made it in that superheroes video yesterday. That was good to see. Mr. Waller said, hey, I saw this guy on Pokey Flips. Good to see him sticking around. Yeah, you know, those Pokey Flippers. Mr. Dan, Catch 'em All Collectibles, and Nick Old School Pokemon. Let's see. Oh, speaking of Dan, I see Dan in there. Pokemon Dentist, good to see you in the chat. He said, we're at 6.69k subs. Oh, look at that. 6.69. Nice. Appreciate that. Channel's growing, man. I like it. Let's see. Son of a Mewtwo said, PK, you're one of the very few with a small ego. It's why I love your channel, but not in the self-worth sense. I appreciate that. I think sometimes my ego could get the better of me, though. But it's me constantly trying to, recognize my failures, recognize my faults, but turn those failures, turn those faults into your strengths. And I think there's a fine balance to everything. And what's a fine balance for me versus what's a fine balance for you, versus a fine balance for somebody else is going to all be on an individual basis. And nobody's going to be able to tell you what that fine balance is. The only person that's going to be able to tell yourself is you. You're the only one that's going to dictate that. And figure out what works best for you. Because at the end of the day, you are number one. You should be number one. Do what works best for you, not what works best for me. So, it's important, man. Let's see. Wade G says, I wish you good luck. I hope there are some somewhat controversial questions asked. I'm sure you will try your best to get some info we all want. Just go to the next question if he tries evading. Yeah, you know what? Controversial is subjective, right? One of the questions I'm going to ask him is, hey, it seems like a lot of cards are currently getting mailed to the P.O. box in California, but then they're going from California to New Jersey to get graded. I don't think that's a really controversial question, but for some people, it might be like, oh my God, you actually asked them, why are they doing that? But maybe it's a very simple answer, and it will make a lot of sense because, from the outside looking in, and I'm sure he's going to be able to definitely clarify this. To send it from California to New Jersey, I feel like it's just adding a middleman, right? So if you're adding a middleman, you're adding more time because somebody now has to receive those cards in California, repackage them, or however they would repackage them to then ship them to Jersey. And I don't know how they're getting to Jersey. Are they flying them there? Are they loading them in the back of a tractor trailer truck and then some tractor trailer drivers driving a tractor trailer truck full of millions of dollars worth of sports cards and Pokemon cards across country to the New Jersey site? Or are they bringing all those cards to FedEx, or are they bringing them all to UPS and then they're just using their shipping capabilities to then ship them to their other? It doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? So maybe that can seem like a controversial question, but maybe it's a very simple answer. Because when you're grading cards, your worst enemy in grading cards is time, and that is how long PSA has your cards for. And we're seeing some of our cards, some of our more recent submissions, there's definitely been an increase in turnaround times. And you would think into 2023, turnaround times should be getting less. Turnaround times should not be getting higher. And the only way that turnaround times in theory could go way higher is if PSA drastically lowered prices, meaning tomorrow PSA drop prices to $10 a card for grading with the TCG special. Then yes, obviously, because of that huge influx of graded cards, turnaround times will go up exponentially. But that didn't happen though, It's been $15 this month, it was $15 last month, the month before, so you can't use that as an excuse. So it just seems like it's an internal issue. So is that a controversial question? Probably not. It seems like a pretty baseline, but I'm curious to hear his answer to that. And then maybe another more controversial question would be, has PSA changed their pack grading scales? Or their pack grading standards, I guess would be a better way to put it, because it sure as hell seems like PSA has changed their pack grading standards. And is that something he even knows about? Because if he denies it, says, oh, I don't think anything has changed, then we could kind of, in a way, press him, because we've scraped pop reports and stuff like this. And, you know, it's interesting. I mean, there could be simple answers, though. He could have a simple answer as, yeah, some of the grading times have come up because a lot of our employees take vacation in July. Oh, okay. Like, it could be that simple. Like, maybe people won't want to hear that answer, but it could be just that simple and that transparent. He's like, oh, yeah, the July 4th week, we have a huge, like, percentage of our employee base likes to take PTO that week. And because we had so many people out for the July 4th week with vacation time, there was definitely, like, a very clear, like, lag time in receiving submissions and grading cards and all this stuff. And if it could be something that simple, which is just like a super transparent answer, it could be that. I don't know. Hopefully he doesn't say like, oh, a fork truck dumped a bunch of people's PSA submissions on the ground, and then we had a team of people trying to scrape together like people's submissions and figure out what happened. Like, I don't think he would ever say that, but like, let's hope that's not the situation. Let's just hope it's a very, very simple answer. And usually the most obvious answer is usually the correct answer. So that's probably what it just is. Um, let's see. Let's see. Comanian, appreciate out there. Tom B said, PK, why do you never have ice in your water? Tom, that's a good question. So, one, this water is straight out of the refrigerator. So, like, you just press it and the water comes out. And when I use ice in it, you can, like, hear it on here. Like, the ice is, like, clinging against your teeth and stuff. And when you're just drinking that normally, or the ice is rattling around in your glass, like, it's not a big deal. But when you're putting ice in a glass next to a microphone and you start shaking around and it starts rattling around, like, you could really, really hear that sound of that ice rattling around in the microphone. That is why I don't put ice in my glass. And that's pretty much it. I mean, even when I take a sip and I like swallow, and you could hear like a gulp with the microphone sometimes. So the thought of just ice banging around in people's ears, like, I don't want to do that too much. You got Chevals in the chat. Good to see you, Chevals. It's funny. Chevals is one of the only few people out there who will tell you guys that I actually was a CGC supporter at one time. Poor Chevals got beat up on CGC submissions the same as me. The Pokemon dentist, this is a funny comment. He said, I can completely relate. I'm a pediatric dentist. I basically make a bunch of kids cry each day. All the crazy kids and parents would drive most insane, but he loves it. Yeah, it's just, you got to also love what you do. That's, people who have like mentioned it in the past to me, like Dan Ketchumore Collectibles. I think it was more in a joking aspect, but he's like, oh, would you ever go full-time PK? And the answer for me is just no. I can never do it. Like, one, I enjoy my job too much, and like, I'm happy. I'm happy where I am. Like, I worked real hard to get to where I am, and it's good to be happy at your normal job. So Rumbum92 says, will Japanese vintage go up in price? I think there's definitely some Japanese vintage that will go up in price, and we've seen it happen recently. And what do you consider vintage? When you say Japanese vintage, are you talking like that WotC timeline, those real early sets? Are you talking mid-era sets? Are you talking Diamond and Pearl? Are you talking black and white? Because, shout out to the Winter Soldier out there. The Winter Soldier, Coulson, he graded a lot of black and white cards, and there's a lot of people that are starting to look at black and white as being like pseudo vintage, and some people are just flat out calling it vintage because they're saying we don't want all these like nuances of what's semi vintage, pseudo vintage. People just say it's vintage. If you consider stuff like that vintage, then yeah, like cards like that have been going up. We've seen it happen sale after sale. Like, again, that's kind of, in a way, like a little bit of an emerging market in the Pokemon hobby, like mid-air full art holos being graded, stuff like this. But yeah, I'd say there's a lot of Japanese vintage will go up in price. There's some Japanese vintage that will probably stagnant too. When you talk like your real early Japanese vintage, like your base set hollows and stuff. But the problem is there's so many of those hollows that exist, and not only do they exist in like large quantities, but in high rare or like really good condition cards, because Japanese cards fresh out of packs were just so much better, especially like fresh out of starter decks and stuff like this. I mean, in a worst case scenario for some of these Japanese cards, like PSA 9 contenders fresh out of packs, like for WotC, it's not like, or for English, I should say, it's not like that at all. Like, you're very, very hard pressed to get 9s or 10s out of a, pack fresh cards from English version, but Japanese just so drastically different. So I think those will always be like some of the limitations for Japanese vintage, is just that overall supply. Now, if demand could grow large enough, and then emerging markets like China, if some of these like emerging Chinese markets start to eat up a lot of this vintage Japanese product, because it does seem like the Chinese buyers do really enjoy those Japanese cards. So if they start to eat up some of that supply, and you start to see a lot of that demand start to be pulled away from Japan, some of the demand starting to be pulled away from the English markets, and then starting to become more central to China, then yeah, you could easily see Japanese vintage go up. I think we're real early. I think there's just, right now we're living in the day to day, in that very speculative world, and China is one of those biggest what ifs that exist out there. Uh, Kevin Clare said Mason as the Punisher. Yeah. Uh, oh, Kevin Clare says he got Pokey Chloe the shout out PK by calling her Wonder Woman on live. Oh, that's sweet. I have to go back and watch her live. Um, let's see. Kevin Clare says, I honestly feel like the buyer pool for mid-era stuff, not WotC, will dry up in a while. The stuff out now is what kids will want in 20 years. Maybe. I mean, there's argument for that, but there's two arguments. It's like everybody that's currently collecting today will want this stuff in 20 years from now. But then there's the people who have the same argument, who say everybody who's collecting today doesn't want the stuff from 20 years ago. And they'll be like, when? And then I'll say, well, when did they get into the hobby? And they'll go, 20 years ago. And I'm like, well, you got kids today are going to want this stuff 20 years from now. But the adult collectors that are in today don't want the stuff from 20 years ago. And they look at you dead in the face and go, yup. And it's like, I think there might be a little tiny flaw to that logic, but some people are just dead set against that everybody today doesn't want anything from 20 years ago, but people collecting today will want this stuff 20 years from now. And it's just like, really compartmentalize that, really take some time, think about what you're saying. Like, but no, I think people are going to want this stuff 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but I think people are going to want Heart Gold Soul Silver 10, 20 years from now. I think people are just always going to want everything. But different people are going to want different things. And one of the beautiful things that we have with Diamond and Pearl and Heart Gold Soul Silver and Black and White is a lot of that collector base may not have re-entered this hobby yet. The same way as the WotC generation was the first to re-enter this hobby, I think in 5-10 years from now, we might see those later generations move in. And if those later generations do move in, they might want to go back and collect and buy the things that they grew up with. And they might have zero attachment to, WotC, and all their attachment is in Diamond and Pearl. But now, it's the same thing where everybody's saying, well, people only want what they're coming back in. If that's the case, and people only want what they re-enter the hobby with, it doesn't matter if you re-enter the hobby in Black and White, you re-entered with XY or Sun and Moon or Sword and Shield. People always say, well, people want those cards. That's the big argument for Sword and Shield. A lot of people re-entered, and they want those Sword and Shield cards. But now, do you believe that the hobby continues to grow and there will be new people that re-enter in the Scarlet and Violet timeline? And if you do believe that, if you do believe the hobby is going to grow and people are going to re-enter during Scarlet and Violet, with that same thought process, and you said they're only going to like what they got back in, well, then they're going to want Scarlet and Violet, and they're not going to want Sword and Shield, So, I mean, this is like real semantic type BS stuff, but it's an important conversation to have, like tackle arguments from all sides. Look at all sides. Because there is no black and white to any answer. It's always some gray answer in between, It's always a combination of everything. Let's see. A lot of people talking about 151 in the chat right now. And it's crazy to think that, even on this channel, we started talking about 151 before any cards were released. Then we started talking about 151 when the Japanese release was coming out, and now you hear so much speculation going on for the English 151, and that's still not even till September. We're in mid-July right now. We still have the rest of July, August, and then September. We're still a decent ways away, and then Obsidian Flames is coming out. And Obsidian Flames, it's interesting to hear some of those conversations too. Like, is Obsidian Flames just going to be a flop? Not because of the actual cards in the set or being a Charizard. Obviously, they have we've seen some of the pack artwork. There's like T-Tars, and there'll probably be like maybe alternative art T-Tar in the set, stuff like this. But the conversation is, it won't be a bad set, but will people just really be looking to the next thing, and that next shiny thing is 151? And will people just kind of pass over Obsidian Flames just because they want the 151? And it's a good question. I don't have the answer. It's like, and the way I like to put it is, if somebody were to walk into their local LGS and there was every single booster box lined up on a wall, so you have a 151, Obsidian Flames, Paldea Evolved, Scarlet and Violet Base, Silver Tempest, Lost Thunder, Astral Radiance. If you just had all those booster boxes lined up in a row, obviously 151 isn't a booster box set, but you got packs on the wall, and all those packs were in theory the same exact price, which pack are you going to grab? Are you going to go after a pack of Astral Radiance when you can pick up 151? The answer is probably not. You're probably going to go after the 151 set. I don't know, though. Everybody's different, but I lean towards people are going to want that 151. And if that happens, and then there is so much demand in 151, and all these other sets really start to get shafted a little bit, and we're going to run into this dangerous timeline where there will be reprints potentially coming out of Scarlet and Violet Base, of potentially of Paldea Evolved, and we're already seeing what current supply of Paldea Evolved. I mean, we're seeing booster boxes. Some, if you really search, they're tougher to find than easier, but you can find them sub $95 a booster box. Do we want reprints of a Paldea Evolved sub $95 booster box? And there's actually been some sales like sub $90. If you really shop around, some of these sales are definitely at auction and stuff. Paldea Evolved booster boxes, some of them sub $90. Do we want a reprint of that? And if the answer is yes, then it's like, I don't think so. But if the answer is no and we still get it, you could have the potential where a set could be stagnant for a long time. And the thing is Paldea Evolved is not a bad set. Scarlet and Violet Base is not a bad set. They are both great sets. We're just running into this area where there's so many good sets right now that we are in a way just we're drowning in good sets almost, and then all those sets I listed, it gets very tough to say, okay, what are people going to want, and then supply will just be the death of some of these sets. It will. We'll run into potential Crimson Invasion timelines, or I think Crimson Invasion probably the best example of just oversupply of a set that people didn't really want, or maybe Steam Siege, but Steam Siege, people make the argument that at release people really liked it, but this will be interesting. We're early, but we'll find out. Let's see. Appreciate Drew. Drew's dropping all the links to my socials. I appreciate that, Drew. Yeah, I have an Instagram account. If you guys don't follow me on Instagram, follow me on Instagram. If you guys want to reach out to me, Instagram is hands down #1, the best place to reach out to me. If you have a message, you want to ask me a question or whatever, Instagram is the best. If I didn't answer your question, don't feel like I'm ignoring you. Just honestly resend the question. I'll get back to it. Sometimes my normal day-to-day, I get most of my messages while I'm at work, and that is the worst time to message me. The best time to message me is this window from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. when I'm making Pokemon content is honestly the time that I'm most available to answer those questions. So yeah, if I didn't answer, just resend the question. I'm sure I'll get to it. The only questions I try not to answer is the speculative questions, should I buy this? Should I do this? And I don't I don't want to answer those because I don't know people's personal situations. And in order for me to like truly give good answers for some of this, when people are like, should I buy this? I have to ask too many like personal questions. And I'm not about that. I'm not about like diving into people's personal finances and stuff. Or, being like, somebody says to you, like, do you think it's a good investment? And you tell them yes. And then yes is such a very broad answer. So I try to stay away from those type of questions. And you've seen it. I go on my channel and I'll talk about like a certain topic for an hour and a half at a time because there's more nuances than just yes or no's for any questions to be asked in this. So Nap90 said, PK, what sports teams did you grow up cheering for? So for baseball, because I grew up in Connecticut, there's no professional sports team in Connecticut. So you're either an hour train ride to New York City or a 2 hour drive to Boston. And for me, just because I was an hour drive to, or a hour train ride right into New York City, I was a Yankees fan. So for baseball, Yankees, man. And then, let's see. And that's it. That's where you lose all your subscribers. Like, oh, fucking PK's a Yankees fan. Fucking knew it. Knew it. Listen, you're in Connecticut. You're one of two teams, Yankees or Red Sox. So growing up, it was real nice. Yankees were doing real well. Won a lot of World Series. And then all the Red Sox fans, we got the... Connecticut's just 50-50 down the line. You're either Red Sox or Yankees. So all the Yankees fans got the shit on all the Red Sox fans, curse of the Bambino and all that BS, until eventually Red Sox decided to finally start winning. And especially when they came back and beat the Yankees down 3 games, like that was tough until that dagger in the heart with Johnny Damon's grand slam. Oh, it's been tough. Okay, maybe it's not 50-50. There's maybe like 1 out of every 50 people is a Mets fan. There's a lot of Mets fans out there too, but they're few and far between. And I got this one friend, I'm not going to mention his name, but we've done the same bet for... This is the dumbest bet, but me and my buddy growing up, like since we were maybe like 7, we've had the same exact bet. I give him 10,000 to 1 odds, and he always tells me that the Mets are going to go undefeated. So every year we make the same bet. I bet him $1, and I give him 10,000 to 1 odds that the Mets aren't going to go undefeated, and it's just become a joke at this time. And there was like 1 year, I don't remember what year. It was like, God, I don't know. I'm just going to say 2007. I don't know if it was really 2007. But there was like 1 year that the Mets went 7-0 to start the season. And my buddy texts me every day for those first 7 games. But this is just inside joke. It's very stupid type of things. But yeah, there was like 1 year they went like 7-0 to start. And he texted me every single day for like, because obviously it wasn't 7 days back to back. It was 7 games. So it was like spread out. Pokey Snipe says, we can also hear PK's gulps. Yes, you can. That's why you don't want to hear Ice still. Leaf Green Commons says, you love making kids cry. I knew dentists were evil. Some people are throwing out like, what? Fresh tat. Fresh tat. He said, I assume Mason has a penguin, and then Mason right below said quack. I should do one that where it's just, so I did this one. If PokeTubers were superheroes, this is who they would be. I think I should also do a video if PokeTubers were super villains. This is who they would be. And there's a couple people I think would make for some pretty interesting villains. Like, I think, who are the biggest supervillains? Like, some of the names that come up is, like, there's a lot of X-Men supervillains. Like, Magneto's a great supervillain. Like, who would be, I want to know down in the chat, which PokeTuber represents Magneto? And, I don't know. Because what is Magneto's thought process, right? Magneto's thought process is, he's willing... At the end of the day, Magneto has good intentions, but they're so convoluted, those good intentions, because Magneto's intention is he's willing to do super evil stuff, but doing it for the good of mutant kind. So even though he does this evil stuff, he's still doing it because he thinks what he's doing is correct. So I'm wondering who in this hobby does evil things, but they're doing it for what they believe is the right intention. Would that be... I don't know. Probably not. I don't know. Or who's the Juggernaut? Like Juggernaut, just unstoppable force, keeps moving. There's or who would be Lex Luthor? You know who would be Lex Luthor? I think Cool Train Orion is Lex Luthor. You know why? Yeah, I think that's easy. The reason why Cool Train Orion would be Lex Luthor is because Lex Luthor is he doesn't have any superpowers, right? Like Lex Luthor, his only superpower is being rich. So where most supervillains have super strength, they could do all this stuff, they could fight these like superheroes. But Lex Luthor is just a human. But yet, who does Lex Luthor fight? Lex Luthor fights the strongest of all the superheroes. Lex Luthor fights Superman. And Lex Luthor has literally the least amount of powers of everyone. But he does understand Superman's kryptonite. He does like develop kryptonite weapons and stuff like this. He does use some technology to make himself stronger. So he can literally fight the greatest superhero who ever existed in any comic book, who has more powers than you could ever imagine. And I do believe Cool Train Orion represents Lex Luthor because Cool Train Orion is the only person who I do believe could go toe to toe with Superman and still win. There's not a lot of humans could go toe to toe with Superman and still win, but Cool Train Orion is the only person that could go toe to toe with the greatest superhero that ever lived. But yeah, that would be a cool one because Lex Luthor is a villain. But yeah. All right. Sorry, went off on a little tangent there, but I think that's pretty funny. Gotta keep skipping to the bottom. Let's see. Son of a Merc says, no one buys Obsidian, so I can afford it. Yeah. I mean, we might have a chance. And that's the thing. Like, is Obsidian Flames going to be a bad set? I don't think it's going to be a bad set. I think Obsidian Flames is going to be a good set. I do. Listen, there's a lot of those perma bowls out there for Modern, but listen, there is a danger for Modern that everybody's focus just moves to the newest, shiniest thing over and over. Oh, sorry. Just people's go to the newest, shiniest thing over and over again. Jada Rabbit says, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. 151 will be the next evolution. A lot of people said that about Celebrations. It's going to just be about supply. I've said it about every set. It doesn't matter the set. It could be the greatest set. It could be Evolving Skies. It could be whatever. If Pokemon produces and prints enough of something, prices will go down. If Pokemon does hold back on printing a lot of this stuff, we don't have crazy reprints, we don't have oversupply, things could potentially like do really well. Pokemon controls all this, so. Let's see. Catch 'em All Collectibles says, let's go Mets. Poor Dan. You know, I feel bad for Dan. Dan, I didn't know you were a Mets fan. I feel bad for you now. Everybody, thoughts and prayers out to Dan Catch 'em All Collectibles for being a Mets fan. They just let you get so close. The Mets. They're like, oh, you think this is going to be your year? We're going to let you get so close. And then right when you get so close, they're like, okay, now we're going to show you why we're the worst team that exists. So Colemanian says he was near Chicago. It was either the Cubs or the Sox. Yeah, see, I can see that. Let's see. Cameron Griffin says, I have a lot of shining cards at CGC. I'm on the fence just regrading the PSA instead of the new CGC one. Any thoughts? I don't know, man. If they're already in CGC slabs, it's tough, especially like shining cards. Like, are you talking baby shinings? Are you talking full art shining cards? Or when you say shining cards, are you talking about like the Neo shinings? So depending on which shinings you're talking about, it really is going to bring up the question of, is it worth it to crack those cards and resubmit the PSA and pay that $15? If it's some Neo Destiny shining, sure, go for it. Assuming that if you go with PSA, it doesn't have like a binder dent or something, because obviously CGC is way more lenient for binder dent stuff like this. So yeah, that's a card that makes sense to cross grade the PSA. If it's some baby shining from Hidden Fates or from Shining Fates, then no, of course not. It doesn't make sense, because to crack that from CGC slab, spend the $15 for PSA, it's just not worth it. So depends on the card. Card. So, all right. Colmanian said, Card Economist is a pretty scummy villain. So, I don't know Card Communist. Card Economist? Is that his name? Card Economist. But I know he's watched some of my videos because I know he sent me some super chats in the past. I've never talked to him like outside of a live or anything like that. But I watched that video that Opossum Bud made today. So if you guys didn't watch Opossum Bud's video, go watch it. It's a great video. Opossum Bud's doing fantastic stuff right now. A lot of people in the Pokemon space are just doing fantastic videos. And I think there's a lot of like really good content coming out right now. But Opossum Bud's video was really like eye-opening for a situation I didn't know. So I guess PokeRev did like a reaction to top 10 or top 15 best polls, and the number one on the list was Card Economist from Team Rocket. There's two variants of the Dark Dragonite. So you have the non-holo version or the holo version. So the non-holo version is number 22 in the set, and the holo version I believe is number 5 in the set. But there were some like printing errors where there was a bunch of sheets got printed in the non-holo, so it should have been number 22, but instead it was number 5. So we call it like the non-holo number 5 variant of that card. I don't know the exact like name people use, but anyways, that's one of the cards. And if you pull that non-holo Dark Dragonite with the number 5 instead of the number 22, it's a huge card. It's worth a ton of money. All your Gem Mint Pokemon type collectors out there, those guys salivate at the mouth for a card like that rare, and especially the Do It Pack Fresh. You're probably considering condition's going to be pretty strong. It's going to be a 9 or 10 contender potentially. That's a big expensive card. So PokeRev had that as a number 1 on his list, and I guess he didn't like put Card Economist in the description of the video, so Card Economist copyright striked PokeRev. That, I don't like that, man. Card Economist, man, if you're out there watching this video, dude, don't do that shit. Like, I just made a video yesterday talking about PokeTubers. There's 31 PokeTubers. I made a video talking about if that PokeTuber was a superhero, which superhero would they be? And for those 31 people, I clipped scenes from their YouTube videos to like showcase them in the video because it's a positive, man. Dude, if PokeRev, literally the largest YouTube content creator in the entire world, is showcasing you on his channel and he makes you number 1 in the video, don't fucking copyright strike him, man. Like, we need to all be on the same team for shit like this. Like, there's 31 people for yesterday's video could have copyright strike me. Like, I called Danny Phantom Mr. Fantastic because Mr. Fantastic's one of the smartest people in the Marvel Universe, and the dude leads the Fantastic Four, and I thought, like, that was a good analogy for Danny Phantom. But I also, like, clipped one of Danny Phantom's videos to highlight him. Like, I can't even imagine in any scenario of any world in which Danny Phantom would copyright strike me because Danny Phantom's a good dude. So, Card Economist, man, don't be a bad dude. Don't do shit like that. That is weird. And, you know, one of the things, if people copyright strike you too, like, it's because they could, like, take revenue from videos. Now, I don't know if it was malicious in that sense or if he was just really upset that. It was weird. Go watch Opossum Bud's video, dude. It's a weird, weird situation. And I don't like that at all, man. If you're out there watching this Card Economist, like, don't do that type of shit, man. Like, that is scummy. We all need to be on the same team, man. And I don't know you, so I don't want to, like, make harsh judgment calls on you, but don't do that stuff, man. PokeRunt says, hey, PK, I'm catching up on the stream. On the part where you showed the Marowak, I just picked up a bunch of cheap rares ranging between 2004 to 2010 yesterday at bulk price, including a mint Celebi. Nice. He says he was just in heaven sorting through them. Yeah, man. It's very rare. Great channel you guys got to watch. Eli from Mile High Pokemon. Mile High Pokemon had a great video, great live he had just like 2 or 3 days ago. Number 1 mod drill will drop the link for Mile High Pokemon. But he had a live, and he just did a $10,000 recent buy, and that $10,000 recent buy he did is a fantastic video. He goes through, like, all the cards he picked up, but what Mile High Pokemon does is he's a bulk seller, and I've had him on this channel before, and the dude's as smart as he comes. Like, Eli, where do you think Eli graduated from college? He graduated from Yale Law School. Yes, Yale Law School. I can't get into Yale Law School. There's going to be 1,000 people watch this video. They're not going to get into Yale Law School. The dude's brain works on a different level, but the fact that him and his wife, they're doing that bulk route, the bulk game, like, he's a great resource, man. You want to watch, like, fun videos, super smart dude, and you can just tell. You listen to Eli talk, like, he's on the level, man. He's a very, very smart dude, and he doesn't make videos that often, but he's a smart man. He's doing it. And listen, somebody like him could be doing the whole Pokemon grinding route and doing bulk and stuff, like, there's hope for all of us. But yeah, he just did a $10,000 recent buy. It's a good video, man. A lot of fun. Let's see. We got Catchmall Collectible says Jets fan. Oh, Dan, you are both a Mets fan and a Jets fan. Oh, my poor friend. That's rough. Jets, I just go to the butt fumble, Dan. Like, if you guys know what the butt fumble was, it's like ESPN, they did like the top 10 worst plays of the week, and the butt fumble was number one on that list for like something like 54 weeks or 59 weeks, something crazy, like over a year, till eventually they had to retire it because they were afraid if they didn't retire it, it would just be like number one into perpetuity. Let's see. That's cool. So shout out to Pat Flynn, Deep Pocket Monster. He says, thanks for the mention in that video, brother. I appreciate it. Super nice surprise. Yeah, man. But Pat Flynn, you are definitely, hands down, the Tony Stark of Pokemon. Because what is Pokemon, or what is Tony Stark? Let me ask you in the chat, is there anybody who like represents Tony Stark greater than Pat Flynn, Deep Pocket Monster? Like, no. And I watched a good interview today. Pat Flynn was on OK J Love's channel, and Pat Flynn was talking about like what he's trying to do for this community and stuff. And like, I got a little story with Pat Flynn, and like one of the things I talked about on my channel, and one of the things I'm constantly trying to adapt and like constantly be better, is one of the things I'm more nervous about anything in this hobby. I always believe that we need to like protect this hobby, because in 2020, there was a lot of like really, really shady characters that entered the hobby in 2020, and they all had the wrong intentions, and it became very apparent. Like, and so when Pat Flynn entered the hobby, like, I was very like, I watched Pat like very closely, and I was watching all his videos, and I was like, okay, because I don't know Pat Flynn at this moment, he's very new to YouTube, and I'm just watching him, and I'm like, this dude has unlimited resources because he's the Tony Stark of the Pokemon world. And I'm like, is this guy Pat Flynn in this hobby for like the right reasons or the wrong reasons? And I watched all his videos like very intently, and I watched as videos just kept getting better, and his knowledge base just kept getting better. And like, and then he was on the Pokey Tea Time podcast, and I asked him some questions when he was on the Pokemon Tea, what the hell was it? Pokemon Tea Time podcast. And then I asked him some questions in the chat, and he answered it. And then I was like, and every time I watch his videos, I'm like, I don't think this dude Pat Flynn is in this for like any wrong reasons. And I was watching him, and the more I watched him, the more I just started like watching more and more Pat's content. I'm like, I think this guy Pat Flynn is on the level. And then there was this guy, Raheem was his name. He was doing fake $10,000 giveaways. He had like little short videos where he was like, hey guys, I'm doing a $10,000 giveaway. I'm giving back to my community for all you guys for these subscribers and stuff. And this week's video is going to be $1,000. And then Rattle was like all over the Raheem controversy, but he was just making literally like fake videos talking about like scamming people, just trying to get subscribers. They were all fake giveaways. Rattle exposed all these as being fake giveaways. And like, so I was watching him too, and then I saw Pat Flynn commented on one of his videos, and Pat Flynn was pretty much like in the comment said to this guy Raheem, was like, hey man, I forget, I wish I like copied and pasted it, but like the way Pat's has a way with words, and not just like in a verbal sense, but like in a written sense too. And he wrote this most elegant comment, pretty much like calling Raheem a scammer, like in the comment section flat out, and it was pretty much like, hey man, this is probably not the way you want to grow your channels. I don't remember the exact wording, but when I read that comment and I was like, okay, this dude, Pat Flynn, he's legit. Because at the time Pat Flynn was growing big, I feel like it was like very, very dangerous territory for Pat Flynn to even slightly call out anyone. And the fact that he wrote that comment, and then obviously that comment got upvoted by a ton of people, and it became like the top comment on that Raheem video. And the problem was that guy Raheem was taking advantage of a lot of people in this hobby. A lot of the people just didn't really know. They were like, oh, I just like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll win $1,000. And it was just ridiculous. And like, Pat Flynn saw through all that bullshit. Rattle made all those videos. And when I saw Pat Flynn write that comment, I was like, this dude, Pat Flynn, he's good, man. And then from when I saw that comment to today, like, I've always had like crazy respect for Pat. And yeah, and what he's doing for Card Party and stuff too. And during that interview he had with OKJ Love, I'm very, very careful to listen to people's words and people's intention. And the way Pat Flynn talked about growing Pokemon, if I had Pat Flynn's resources, he's doing it the way I wish I could do it. I just don't have the ability to do what Pat's doing. And, you know, Pat is taking money out of his own pocket to help grow this hobby too. And he talked about, like, in order to have like a world record, like a Guinness Book World Record, it was $21,000. And his managing agency or whoever he helped to like put this event together pretty much told Pat like, hey man, this is a waste of money. Like, don't do this. But Pat's like, no, I want people to have memories from this event. And I do honestly believe that by them being part of this Guinness Book of World Record of the, you know, largest mass pack opening, like, people will remember this, and this will be something that will be taken from this event from now until forever. And listening to the way Pat was talking about it, I'm like, Pat's legit, man. Pat's doing the right things. And one of the things Pat talks about too is like the community aspect, and there is the Pokemon community aspect too. And one of the things I try to do on this channel, I can't do it the way Pat does it, but one of the things that I've strived to do is bring everybody on my channel, to highlight everybody on my channel, because whether it's the littlest guy like your Mile High Pokemon who's grinding bulk, or, you know, your middle of the road content creators like Catch 'em All Collectibles, or the bigger guy, you start to get bigger till Possum, to Rattles, to Ryans, till eventually you get all the way to PokeRev on the top. And the thing is I've had all those people on my channel before, and not only have I had all those people on my channel, I've been able to put them all in the same room on occasions. Like when I had that mega live stream, and it was myself, Ryan, Rattle, Co-Trainer, or myself, Ryan, Rattle, PokeRev was on there, SM Pratt, Pokemon Classics was on there, Dan Catch 'em All Collectibles, Jake Pokenomics. Like, you had people on there with just the most largest variation of subscriber accounts, and they were all in the same room talking about the same thing. And Pokemon Radar was in there. There was just so many people, and there's like 12 people in there, and Gary King Pokemon. It was just this wide variety of people, and all those people are so different, man. But this is the thing about this hobby too, and the most important thing about this hobby is everybody brings something. And not everyone brings all negative, no one brings all positive, but like, everybody brings something to the table. And it's just like what used to be, like, this is my mat. This is an old mat. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but this is like the original background I had. This is like the original Last Supper theme. And I just think about this, like, in this hobby as a whole, like, everybody in a way is just sitting at this table, right? And everybody's bringing something different to that table. And one of the best things you ever can do as a collector, investor, flipper, whatever you want to call yourself on any day, is the most important thing you can do is, like, learn from everyone in this hobby. And what you got to do is you got to learn the things you like about people, but you also have to learn the things you don't like about people. And if you learn both those things, you're able to take the things you like and make them your own. So if I do something one way and Rattle does it another way, or Cool Trainer Ryan does it another way, or Gary King Pokemon, or SM Pratt, or PokeRev or Deep Pocket Monster, and we all do things differently, but you like little things we do, you could take each one of those things and then you turn it into something new and you make it your own. And when you make something new and you make it your own, you're going to just come out way better in the long run. And that's one of the things I constantly try to do. I do not want to ever stay static in this hobby. I constantly want to stay fluid in this hobby and learn from people. Learn from your gem mint Pokemons. Learn from these guys. Learn from your Pokemon radars. Learn from these guys. And you got to learn from them because they've already made a lot of the mistakes. So if you could learn from their mistakes, you could potentially not make those mistakes in the future. And one thing history loves to do above all other things, history loves to repeat itself. And I've already seen it happen. There's a lot of people do the same mistakes over and over and over again. But if you can learn from others' mistakes and not make them yourself, you get this luxury of not repeating history. It's just a fantastic thing. And this hobby is just a great thing. And Pat, you're doing it right, man. I'd love to get Pat on here one day for an interview. Pat, if you're ever out there, man, you are always welcome at any time to stop in. We can have a one-on-one. I love to pick your brain, man. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, good to see Pat in here. Let's see. Yeah, Pat said he remembers that guy. Yeah, that guy was he was a scummy dude, man. I'm happy Rattle was able to push him out of the hobby. He was taking advantage of people, you know, and like that's the stuff I don't like. Mr. Waller says, we're watching PK fall in love real time. Nah, PK, I just do this thing. I have a way of like talking out my thoughts and I work through different things. Basic Trainer with the quote of the day. Basic Trainer said, learn from your successes, not from your failures. But you should learn from both, Basic. You should learn from your success and your failures. Because if you're not learning from your failures, man, you might do that cardinal sin of repeating those failures or making the same mistake. Like, it's okay. Make mistakes. Like, just don't keep repeating those mistakes. Deep Pocket Monster said, I appreciate you. Thanks so much. I'm sure it will happen at some point. Busy summer over here. I can only imagine. But yeah, no, it's an open invite, man. But, yeah, guys, I made it to the bottom of the chat. I'm an hour and 30 minutes into a live that I just want to give everybody a heads up. Listen, tomorrow, as long as it doesn't get canceled, Nat Turner, the president and CEO of PSA Grading, will be on my channel for a live interview. If you guys have the ability to tune in, it's at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, July 18th, which is going to be great. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a big moment for this channel. I hope it doesn't get pushed. If it does get pushed, listen, I understand Nat Turner has a busy schedule. We'll just have to reschedule it. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But listen, guys, as always, appreciate every single one of you guys out in the hobby. If it wasn't for you guys, I would not be making these videos. I wouldn't have a reason to talk into the void for an hour and 30 minutes. But with that said, as always, I'll catch you on the next video.